Welcome to Action Couch Life. Why are you here? Sorry that came off as cruel. I'm just saying, who watches this trash?
What better time for a Disgaea review than October? Kinda. I mean, yes, these games are set in an afterlife about demons and such, but only the stories in this franchise have gotten a lot sillier than the darker, spookier plots of the original few titles. Making it less of a Halloween treat and more of a anytime monster mash. This tonal change is important to keep in mind when tackling a later entry to the franchise like Disgaea 7.
But they're up to 7? That's kind of cool.
Odds are most people aren't going to just randomly jump in here without playing a previous title, which is a shame, as the game is very newcomer friendly. I know people like to toss around the term soft reboot or other such phrases when a game becomes more balanced and easy on new players, which in Disgaea's case, it's almost a moot point. Every title has had different mechanics and options exclusive to that particular entry, while keeping a bulk of the core gameplay untouched. So each one has their own learning curve to tackle. The number on the entry is merely cosmetic, like what you get with the Final Fantasy titles. Though I think, since, unlike Final Fantasy, they give each game a subtitle, it would benefit from dropping the numbers moving forward, even though they're in a shared universe. Disgaea 7, however, does a massive overhaul to several key elements. That's what gives it that reboot vibe I was going on about. The bonus gauge is gone. Item worlds changed a lot. Other staples like the Kara world are just gone, in fact. Sure, it was also absent in 6. Just the newness of transitioning to 3D blinded me to that loss. Now it just leaves this particular title feeling incredibly stripped back. If you're a returning player, a fair amount of the strategy and how you approach the battles, as well as level your team, will need to be rethought out. In this regard, it feels like they were specifically targeting newer fans, yet they don't really show this in the narrative. The universe of Disgaea as a whole has never really been fully explained. You just kind of pick up bits of lore here and there from each game. Obviously, the first ones did the bulk of the heavy lifting. That and Makai Kingdom. So let's just tackle the basics real quick. There are many different planets in this universe, and they each have a corresponding netherworld. Disgaea 1 has Earth and its Hell as primary settings. After that, each pairing has some sort of gimmick tied to their netherworld, helping to push the narrative. As the franchise grew, you got some more insights in how they all fit together. Travel between netherworlds, and even wars between them, are fairly common occurrences. None of this is particularly needed to enjoy Disgaea 7, but also, none of this is really explained in Disgaea 7 either. You get a few incredibly oddly worded explanations of some things as they pop up. Like Celestia, which is supposed to just be heaven, being referred to as the place where all the dead souls are held, which it's really not. Dead souls become prinnies.
The Prinny Dance.
Either in Celestia or their corresponding netherworld. This is the kind of things they should be spending more dialogue to explain before they pop up late into the postgame.
Be careful. That Prinny's got a strange soul.
I can't even measure its powers with my abilities. I only know that it's stronger than Super Deity Mugai.
Don't worry, Scamps. As long as Higan's a show size here, you won't lose. Hey, fake pretty! State your name! You call yourself as a Shosai, huh?
Listen up. I'm Rekka's Shosai, the unrivaled, undefeated, ultimate sword master.
Instead, this title just loves to beat you over the head with how quirky Demon Society is. Oh, they betrayed you! Good, that's what a real demon should do. It's cute enough when it's built up, or plot relevant like in Disgaea 3. Here it's used more for just a quick joke or a little titter at best. That is until the final act, but at this point the gravity of the situation falls flat from how nonchalantly it's been handled in the lead up to it. Even to a longtime fan, it still felt almost out of place. More often than not, giving a delivery that feels more like lip service. That it needs to be there. Even if maybe 3 characters tops actually act that way. For the first time in the extended Makai series of games, it's starting to get old. It was handled far better in previous titles, which makes it feel so stiff here. I can't really say how it comes off to people who haven't spent every bit of 1,000 hours with the franchise before now. Just being honest, the writing, or possibly the translation for 7, is just less than I expected.
Whoa, your name's super long and impressive now.
Hear it and weep. My butthole has healed, and I've become even more powerful in my quest to get revenge against Tegan.
Plenty of elements like Prinnies, Overlords, Heaven, and a lot of the staples for the franchise are just assumed you already know about them, leading to a sense of surface-level storytelling that lacks real depth, making it more like a sitcom than the well-crafted fantasies that came before, which helps you jump in and out of the story mode more easily. So it has some advantages for sure. Just I missed how seemingly each game before now actively built on the larger narrative
Are you prepared
to the universe during the story. Here all that pops up in like the last 5 hours. I'd be willing to make a full lore breakdown of the Disgaea series and its tertiary titles, if there's a demand for it, just to save time and more properly focus on the game at hand. I won't be explaining anything not specifically brought up in this title. Probably. There's a lot of ground to cover, so we'll see. The main campaign in these titles tend to be fairly straightforward. It's more a way of keeping the player engaged as they spread the tutorial out over the first 2/3 of the game. Thankfully, they pace themselves because Disgaea is a micromanagement fan's dream game, which makes it a nightmare for someone just looking for a casual RPG. The amount of optional menus and mechanics to level and customize each unit is astounding. Even in the best Disgaea games, the plot almost always takes the backseat to ludicrous power leveling. Level 99, that's baby stuff. Level 9,999, that's just your first step to perfection, my friend. You can finish the basic story in around 20 to 40 hours for most entries. 7 is no different there, clocking in around 35 hours for my initial playthrough to get up to the post-game. From there, it's all about getting those gains. 100 hours or more will be needed for the real completionists out there trying to get that platinum trophy. The classic games, like Makai Kingdom, Disgaea 1 and 4, all had darker, more plot-focused stories, dealing with life, death, and the necessity of evil, which has clearly been dropped in later installments for a more wacky, over-the-top comedy plot that leans on being a parody of some existing trope or narrative style, which is fine. But it hurts replayability as comedy is rarely as funny the second time around. Plus it stifles how much I should really get into here in order to keep these punchlines clean. Because honestly, when the game tosses a twist at you, you'll see it coming, but they still manage to land it. So let's keep it surface level. The story here is about a weeb otaku cat girl who just happens to be some super rich business owner. They are traveling to Hinamoto, a small collection in Netherworlds with a strong feudal Japan vibe to them, for both a sightseeing trip, but also to collect the founding weapons. These legendary, semi-sentient weapons that obviously most main characters will be after for one reason or another as the game treks along. Now, as the game pushes forward, you end up with a handful of colorful, quirky characters that refreshingly each have a deep personal reason to join in the fight, often conflicting with each other or outright trying to sabatage the main objective, only to be united together because of trust, friendship, and shared trauma. Where this story excels is showing how multiple people handle loss and trauma differently. Yet once they piece things together and see exactly how bad the others must be hurting, it changes them. It changes their motivations and honestly their entire worldview. Empathy is the theme here.
You're allergic to empathy?
And it's almost embarrassing that it took me so long to realize that, as empathy is overly mentioned early on and often through the entire story. Ordinarily, a Disgaea game will take its time building up the stakes for its plot. 7 starts right up and keeps ramping up the intrigue until suddenly it just stops. I'm assuming because Disgaea is one of those rare game franchises that still offer free demos, so obviously they'd want to put their best foot forward when crafting the demo area. Only that momentum starts to fall off right after you give them $60. They even bring the whole thing to a halt for a tournament arc. Sure, it's just one chapter and there's a full game mode added around it, but still, as an anime fan, I've developed an allergy to tournament arcs. Plus, I tend to power through a chapter at a time, then grind out some levels, so a particularly dull chapter will hang around with me for a while. See, the pacing of Disgaea gives you the freedom to choose whenever you want to work on your party. With a presentation that makes me think of monthly mangas, more than anyone yet, 7 has a nice feeling of time passing. It really feels like they're taking their time to figure out what's going on, make plans, and track down these founding weapons. Each chapter is broken down into acts. You get a story section before and after each stage, so feel free to step away for a while in the slower segments to make sure you keep your crew well-rounded and ready for anything. Eventually you can make an all-purpose death machine, but in the beginning, you're gonna need at least 4 decent hitters. You will be forced into situations where you can't use range attacks and others where you absolutely need it. On the whole, the story stages stay pretty balanced. Even when the plot is dragging along, the thematic puzzles that get worked into these fights keep things interesting. Then, when the story starts to tie together and finally gets good, the stages just become more about figuring out how to remove the boss from the boost panels, or manipulating the geo panels to even things out. Staying true to Disgaea standards, the post-game has returning super bosses, and over-the-top strong characters you can recruit. That and the DLC brings in a healthy mix of the previous game's protagonists too. This is the best part to the story side of the titles. Even if you haven't played the others, it doesn't matter, as none of your party knows who Etna is either. So you get a decent introduction for each of them. One that will either remind you why you love these guys, or get you incredibly curious what the hell their whole deal is. Unfortunately, the DLC used to just be the post-game bosses included with your game, but now you can just play them whenever you like. By like, I mean pay actual money. So these stages not only seemingly scaled to my current highest level character, but are incredibly watered down. Typically just a few units and a returning character in a field somewhere. The plus side to that is you can have so many different unique units at any point before the bare bones post game. Unfortunately, I held off until then, so there was nothing left for me to do. I had no real reason to finish the content I paid money for. There's no voice acting in the DLCs, though in battle the character units do talk. The bulk of the playtime won't happen here in the story area. The bulk of it happens over here, in Item World.
This is the Item World.
Every item in the game, even consumable healing items, can be leveled up. You go inside the item or weapon or whatever, and just start cracking heads.
Need me to crack any skulls?
In older games, they had the bonus gauge, as I previously mentioned. It used to give you lots of items related to whatever you went into, making it the primary way to level up your gear while getting upgrades and more items to jump into later. That's changed here to these challenge rules that just level up your item more. Kind of a disappointment, to be honest, especially in story mode stages, as it horribly nerfs the rewards you used to get. Obviously, you won't be getting bonus item levels. Instead, it's just a few weak items or some bonus experience and money. These changes make me think of Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced Law System. Don't lift, men only, clear in so many turns. You get the gist of it. They do help you get out of your comfort zone and by no means do you actually have to do them, but it's something to make you come up with new plans instead of just sending in your strongest unit to rip and tear. Also in the older titles, it was a set number of stages per item that you could level up. It would cap out, so you could, in fact, mess up an axe you'd put several hours into getting with no real way to fix it. Now you can reset your item back to level 1 with increased base stats and try again, which means near infinite growth for any item. It's the same system they use for your characters, just reworked for equipment. Only there's a catch. You pick one of 3 options for what you can turn it into, and there's no guarantee that your sword stays a sword. Still, it has a chance to turn back into one eventually, so you just keep at it. I mean, you can expend the special item world currency and use that to turn it back into its base item, so there's no real risk of losing a sword or a gun or whatever. These item world stages are all randomly generated, but beatable. Now anyway. Old games were truly random, and you could just get stuck, having to back out. If you had a Gincy exit, that is. If not, well, it's ended more than one playthrough of Disgaea for me. Visually and design-wise, the D7 item world stages are fairly bland. The old ones had a very stylized look to them. If you went into a spear, you'd just see massive spears everywhere. Lots of broken buildings and pirate ships could come rolling in. It was wild. Perhaps I haven't spent enough time pushing through different items in this game, though that's because I didn't want to. The bland levels just didn't hold my interest. Every few stages, you can stumble into a mystery room that could be a store, a boss, or just something strange. It's always nerve-wracking the first time you stumble into a new one of these rooms, as you have no way of knowing what fresh hell's in store for you if you talk to the NPCs. Again, this is just going off of my past fears from getting suddenly slammed by a level 3000 professor just for saying hello. These stages will put your map exploring abilities to the test. Try jumping on everything, look for hidden paths, trust no one. The item world could be considered the actual game. Lots of Disgaea fans joke that the story's just the tutorial, which I would say holds up, but so much is missing from the other titles that it just makes Item World feel like a world map. Just a place to kill time and level up so you can beat the next boss that's waiting for you. Then it's required to get you ready for the secret bosses, only it's just the one, but he straight up sucks.
I'm the star of the netherworld. See the results.
And yeah, Kara World is seemingly gone forever. Kara World would let you augment your character's movement range, counterattacks, base stats, stuff like that. These have all been moved to the Dark Assembly, or regular little increases you get from leveling up past 1000. The theme to the Dark Assembly changes to fit each game's setting. Here it's sumo wrestling based. Previously we saw the Senate for that netherworld, student council, stuff like that. Regardless of the theme, you always used it to propose changes for your character, unlock new dungeons, get new units, request better items to be sold in the stores, and most importantly, unlock new features for the game. You can bribe voters to your side, get them drunk, or knock them out before the vote. If you lose, you can pay up, beat them up, or just give up. Once you get the hang of things, you will rarely actually lose, but until you're strong enough to toss the whole room, make sure you save first. When you pick to have a rumble, it's on. Everyone's just throwing hands, regardless of whose side they're on. Collateral damage can pop up anywhere. So make sure whomever has the highest level there, for or against you, that you can tank their hits. Getting that strong isn't overly difficult. This is where you spend those hundreds of hours if you're like me. The level cap is 9,999 in this game, but you can always reincarnate back down to a level 1 character, while keeping a percentage of your stats added to your base points each time. Not to mention they make it take less and less experience points each time to regain those levels each loop. Also, when you reincarnate, you can switch classes to learn new skills and abilities. All skills level up as you use them, plus you can modify and power them up in the skill shop, the same place where you learn abilities. These passive powers that give you and bosses incredible buffs. Specific element damage resistance, increased healing, ignore heights or terrain while moving. It lets you make some crazy OP characters or incredibly specialized units once you start mixing and matching these things. Now, it will take a long time to craft just one perfect character. Luckily, the game has squads you can assign them to in order to share XP, mana, stats, skills, a whole number of ways to help not only passively level up new units, but also speed up battles and increase other game mechanics that make the whole process easier overall. The juice bar pockets bonus experience and mana, as well as a small amount of stats when you level up, that can be used on anyone else you like, making late game additions go from level 1 nobodies to a functional member of your party in seconds. That, or just use it to tighten up some weak stats on your casters if you play like I do. Just make sure to keep a fair amount of XP banked, as you use that for the currency to upgrade your squads. There's a cheat shop here that allows you to do exactly that. Cheat. You can make enemies stronger or easier, increase the different gains for experience and money, allowing you to hyper-focus on skills or whatever you're currently grinding after. This gives you the ability to match your progress to your patience. Are you more of a high-risk, high-reward kind of person? Ramp that difficulty meter up. You want to take it slow and be more methodical? Go ahead and lower the enemy strength and fine-tune the gains to maximize a payoff based off of the stages you're rerunning. You can easily outlevel your skills to the point where your raw stats are just annihilating every enemy before you can get a second spell off. In that case, crank up the skill points, and now every cast counts as 5. Disgaea makes an entire game around wasting time somehow feel like none of your effort is wasted. I always hated in old RPGs when I just needed some money for gear, so I'd fight really weak enemies just because they were fast to get the gil. It wasn't hard. You know what else it wasn't? Fun. With this game mechanic, every fight can get you exactly what you need. That just feels good. With the massive amount of unique units and creatable classes, this option is definitely needed. Unfortunately, there's just not enough to do that would merit leveling up more than a few characters. Outside of achievement hunting, which, though lacking an external display to show others like PlayStation and Steam, even the Switch version has an in-game menu that allows you to keep track for personal satisfaction, even if the bragging rights aren't there. Remember, Perillica's a tourist, so you can go sightseeing in different netherworlds this time around, giving you treasure and some surprise new recruits with custom color palettes that you can unlock as you run around. Plus, 2 unique game modes can be found here, an elimination tournament to earn prizes and money, and Demon Shogi, which, that one's not fun. It's all the joy of a surprise Japanese board game section, like Mahjong and Yakuza, just now with the added benefit of replacing standardized game pieces with Disgaea units that have hundreds of different moves. It's shogi in name only. Look, it's okay. Just use a guide here. It's with fixed units, so you literally can just punch in the win code and hit execute. If there was a random option, that might be worth it, but it looks like just 4 specific puzzles, so why bother getting good at it? All of this becomes extra disappointing when you consider how Disgaea is known for its robust post-game activities. The lack of this longevity from omission only serves to shine a spotlight on some of the odder cut content. Losing the hidden chest around the base map each chapter still eats at me. Yet I never found the hidden eye needed to unlock that class, so at least they tried to keep in some reason to explore the free moving areas in this title. Not that I could be bothered, but this time, that's on me. If they cut a bunch of content to focus on Demon Shogi, that's on them. Sure, this sounds like small gripes, but it's a slow death by 1,000 little cuts when I compare what I'm playing now to what it once was. Performance-wise, it doesn't hold a candle to 4 or 5 in smoothness, but it's definitely a step up from 6. 6 being the first game where they moved to 3D models instead of 2D sprites, so I was way more forgiving there. Yet, despite all the advancements they made in gameplay and frame rates here, they stepped far further back in visual style and design. From the item world's dull, lifeless look to the busy and honestly visually confusing to navigate the pointer around story mode stages, I constantly find myself more focused on the negative aspects of any level I was playing. Before, I could easily spend hours just enjoying the battles. Now I was pulling up my status menu mid-fight just to focus on my growth or make some plans for what to do next. Anything to keep my mind busy and keep me engaged. With less content that required me to level up for, and a diminished desire to play just to grind out characters, I can't honestly say I'll be fully completing this one. That's part of why I think it's a perfect game for new fans. It won't leave you frustrated that there's more to do than any first-timer would reasonably want or know how to do. I never finished Disgaea 1 or Makai Kingdom's post-games my first time through, and it scared me away from the franchise for a good while. There's a perfect amount of added challenge without focusing on a steady trickle of content to keep you pushing forward. It's just 100% gameplay. So, not to sound like a broken record here, but the visuals used to be vivid and engaging. Now, the game mechanics are polished to near perfection. In a game that loves its stats and menus, they definitely put a lot of care into making those elements as user-friendly as possible. That might be your thing. If you just want the satisfaction of numbers go up, you won't have to navigate a bunch of story or gimmick modes to do so. It becomes pure strategy and resource management. In an odd way, this makes Disgaea 7 like the exact opposite of Skyrim, a game notorious for having a staggering amount of content, but a laughably basic leveling system. Yet, in both titles, you play until you've experienced enough of what it has to offer, not needing to squeeze every last drop out of the title until the idea of starting another playthrough seems pointless. That's a fitting rating for this game. It does enough to be considered good. It's not groundbreaking. It won't stay with you for years to come, but you'll enjoy your time with it. Then, down the road, you'll pick it back up and tackle it in a completely different way, having a very different experience, but still functionally the same. If you are interested, but the price is a little high for your tastes, I would recommend grabbing Disgaea 4 Complete on your system of choice, as that title is available on every platform 7 is, and at a fraction of the price. If you don't mind throwing down full price and a little extra for some DLC, then jump on into 7. In the current market of remakes, story-focused RPGs that feel more like movies than games, Disgaea offers something closer to what you would remember from the early PS2 era of games, just with a more modern tone and sense of humor. It's a breath of fresh air from 2004. I might have seemed overly critical with my review. Trust me, it comes from being purely objective and honest. The heart of the franchise is still burning very strong here. Disgaea is a slap to the face of common sense game design, a loving parody of the type of RPGs that came before it. Ridiculous stats and ludicrous damage, being tied around surreally silly attacks, and equally quirky characters, guarantees that for many games to come, the crew here will be a welcome DLC pack or post-game surprise. The hardest part of reviewing not only one of my favorite franchises, but a completely competent video game in its own regard, is that it does its job very well. The positives are to be expected, so there isn't much need to mention things like combat flow or menu navigation. It's handled very well, so the few aspects that are disappointing tend to be the major talking points. I thoroughly enjoyed my trip to Hinamoto, and it was great seeing some old friends again along the way. Although it's not a title I'll be tossing in the shoebox, Disgaea 7 is one I will be coming back to at least a few more times. I'd like to take a second to give an extra special thanks to our Patreon supporters, and a regular thank you to everyone else. Go ahead and leave me a comment if you have a suggestion for what to cover next, or just join our Discord and hop in the conversation over there. Until next time, stay comfy.